Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's take a step back and actually consider one thing most people in Washington agree on right now. Donald Trump's closer to impeachment tonight than he was last month or last year or really any other time. We know that from the whip count. Here's another thing most people agree on. That's not because of Bob Mueller or Nancy Pelosi, who'd long resisted this course. Donald Trump closer to impeachment right now because of this anonymous whistleblower who took a major risk working within the system and the law to warn his or her bosses in the intelligence department and ultimately Congress about this now exposed Ukraine plot. These leakers take major risks to their career or even more. And now, when you have a formal whistleblower like this, it's not a conventional leak. Because remember, he or she didn't even leak publicly to the press. He or she followed the rules in federal law. Now, other scandals and government misconduct have also been exposed by wider leaks. And there's a great debate over when it is acceptable to blow the whistle or leak. One of America's most famous leakers is, of course, Daniel Ellsberg. He upended the Vietnam War with the Pentagon Papers leak, which led to a landmark Supreme Court case that protected the right to publish certain leaks. So, Ellsberg is, of course, a fitting person for us to consult tonight. I just spoke with him, and I want to play you some of what he said, including new remarks emphasizing how risky it is to challenge a president.
I nevertheless congratulate this whistleblower on the success that they've had so far in getting that information out and on the courage that she showed or he showed in taking this on. Even following the rules, to challenge a president for wrongdoing is not safe, either physically or legally. And I hope that the Democrats in Congress, in the House, will take every precaution to keep her identity or his identity secret from the president.
Asked Mr. Ellsberg about Donald Trump's actions and public threats against this whistleblower, including compared with other presidents.
I don't think any of the previous presidents put a target on the back of the whistleblower, calling to armed and violent constituents, in some cases, to say that that person should be treated before trial, before due process, anything else, as a spy or a traitor. He is calling for physical attack, I would say. I think that's an impeachable offense or a criminal offense in itself.
An impeachable or criminal offense. Very interesting coming from someone who's been through these issues to the point of creating precedents that remain to this day. Now, as part of our reporting here, as we dig into this, we also want to point out that, of course, many leakers pay huge penalties. Consider a former CIA employee who has all kinds of experience here, named John Kiriakou. Now, he served in operations pursuing terrorists. He also publicly discussed tactics like torture and waterboarding, and then was convicted later of providing the identity of an undercover officer to a journalist who ultimately, we should know, didn't publish the name. Now, Mr. Kiriakou spent almost 2 years in jail for that offense as a leaker. Now, I spoke with him. This is new, airing for the first time. And he said what he thinks about Donald Trump calling the whistleblower a spy and how dangerous it is.
This is a very, very dangerous thing that he's doing. When I blew the whistle on the CIA's torture program, I got what the FBI called 3 credible death threats. And I actually had to take my family and leave town for a week. So when you have the President of the United States joking, maybe not joking, about death penalty offenses for someone reporting waste, fraud, abuse, or illegality, I think that's a very dangerous tack to take.
Very dangerous. And that's coming from someone who's paid a price for leaking, to be sure. Now, House Democrats are going to extra lengths to protect this whistleblower's identity from what they say are Trump's Republican allies who might try to expose these whistleblowers. So it's a lot of context here for these threats. Now, I also asked Keriakou if whistleblowers today need to worry about retaliation. Do you think they, in this climate, have to worry about being improperly charged?
I do think they have to worry, and I think that it's improper and inappropriate that they have to worry. If you see any of that fraud or illegality, you are compelled by law and by your oath to go to the authorities. Any whistleblower or potential whistleblower really does have to take into account that this whole thing may fall apart and you may find yourself behind bars, even if you believe you did the right thing.
You could find yourself behind bars. Whatever you think of why people do these things, that may be chilling for people in government. But that's not really the dark note that we end on, having consulted some of these very famous people who've been in these fights, who've made these hard calls, who didn't know how it was going to turn out. I want to leave you with something that Daniel Ellsberg also told me tonight. It's his advice for people in government right now who might be concerned about President Trump's ongoing conduct. What do you, Daniel Ellsberg, say to these now 2 whistleblowers out there tonight?
I congratulate them. What I'd like to speak to is the people who, like me, kept their mouths shut when they knew that the president was doing wrong. I learned better once I was in Vietnam and I actually experienced a war up close.
Do you think there are others?
The stakes are.
Do you think there are others inside the Trump administration?
I'm absolutely sure. For one thing, the whistleblower revealed that there were more than a dozen people on that program, on that call. And this president is turning out to be a domestic enemy of the Constitution. Every one of them should be a whistleblower right now, and it's not too late.
It is Wednesday, the 9th of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Because there's always more than one. Speaking of more than one, thank you, Daniel Ellsberg, at the top for reminding us that there's a lot of people who are direct witnesses to what Donald Trump has done, and they can all become whistleblowers right now. It is not too late, really. Really, it's not. So, get a spine. Do what you need to do to steel your nerve and expose this fraud for what it is. Legacy, I know in the right wing, legacy means nothing. It's always the immediate, and it is always dealing with, well, power right now. And we'll continue making sure our power stays as each day presents itself anew. All right, speaking of presenting itself anew, William Barr's DOJ went to court to argue that, the Watergate decisions that allowed the grand jury material that eventually impeached Richard Nixon was wrongly decided. And we can't allow grand jury material of Trump or anything in the Trump orbit to be sent to Congress. That'll lead to Trump's impeachment, and we cannot have that. Well, they didn't go that far, but they're basically arguing that Watergate should have never happened. I know we think that the actual break-in shouldn't have happened, but what they think is that, we should have got away with it. There was nothing wrong because when the president commits a crime, to use the powers of government to go after his enemies, perceived and real, with the full force of government to destroy their lives, and if they get driven to suicide, that's even better. And all those things happened. And it wasn't just that. But Nixon had henchmen who would go and physically threaten people. Yeah, plumbers. That was a nice term to call them, plumbers. They were rat effers, and there was a UCK in there. I just don't feel like pronouncing it completely this early in the morning. I know there's a podcast to come up, and so it doesn't matter, but right now I feel a little restrained, shall we say, because I am livid. Barr needs to go the way of John Mitchell. Now, I know John Mitchell didn't get convicted or tried and convicted and then sent to jail until after he was out of office, but, you know, he did. He did have to quit, resign. Yes, he did. But so there is still a argument to be made on whether, you know, you can go after a public official like William Barr in his capacity as Attorney General and charge him with an actual crime. Well, we do have Ed Meese. Let's not forget about Ed Meese. We all put the onus on John Mitchell, but Ed Meese was corruption with a capital KKK, too. Let's not forget about what he did in the East Bay with the Black Panthers. Oh, yeah, if it wasn't for Ed Meese, we wouldn't have had the gun control we have now, because when the Black Panthers went to the court steps there in Oakland and stood with their high-capacity military-grade rifles, no bullets, by the way, okay, no ammo. Boy, white America could not get gun control fast enough, because if the angry blacks are they're gonna kill us in our sleep. And how would we know? How would we? So, Ed Meese was responsible for that. Mm-hmm. Well, partly responsible because, you know, I mean, Reagan was governor at the time, too. Now, Ed Meese was DA of Alameda County at the time. And he was also responsible for bringing in or convincing Reagan to bring in the National Guard when there were anti-war protests up and down Telegraph Avenue, spilling over up on Dwight, just right there by Bongo Burger at People's Park. National Guardsmen who were stationed around the park saw somebody on a balcony there across the street at Telegraph and Dwight, fired and killed a guy. Ed Meese was responsible for that. And yesterday, for all of the good work that he's done for the right wing and white America, Ed Meese was granted or awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor by Donald Trump. So, here we are. Everything comes full circle. Watergate should have never happened, meaning the conviction of those who were involved in the crimes of Watergate. That should have never happened because they were never crimes. Every legal decision that came out of that was adjudicated wrongly, and we don't have any legal precedent to tell you or any legal basis to tell the court why that is so, other than the fact that it's Donald Trump's administration saying it, and that should be forceful enough. And the judge said, oh, wow. So we'll see how far that goes. And when we see his taxes, we will then know not just that he's not as rich as he claims to be, but the entanglements with not just corrupt governments, but with actual mobsters who may be running governments themselves as mob states. I'm looking at you, Vlad. But actual mobsters that live a floor above him and a floor below him. They're at Trump Tower there in New York. Yeah, they're all over his Trump Tower. Russian, Sicilian. It doesn't matter. There's mobsters from all over the world, and they have property with Trump. What better way to launder your money, ill-gotten as it is? All right. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Because we have a little bit of a theme here at being Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A federal judge threatened to toss Betsy DeVos in jail for contempt. Threatened. I wish they would stop threatening these rich people and just do it. And if you can't do that, how about a little bit of asset forfeiture? Asset forfeiture, how about 3 of her yachts? 3 of the mega yachts that she owns, and maybe that'll get her attention. Mitch McConnell's campaign bragged to supporters about how his wife, Elaine Chao, corruptly favored Kentucky developers. Yeah, they can bring mob money from all over the world right there into Kentucky. And Trump's withdrawal from the Open Skies Treaty would be a big gift to Putin and undermine confidence in the U.S. commitment to Ukraine, let alone our own freaking allies. Fairly odd now, isn't it? Our allies are the enemy, and our enemies are now our friends. That's bringing the world together. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where China calls the Prague City Council's move to cancel a partnership pact a breach of faith. Really? What else would it be? And the United Nations could run out of money if member states don't pay what they owe. And by member states, we mean the United States. And by not funding the UN so that it could go basically out of business is a feature, not a bug. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the link to our Patreon page, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We need to get newish machinery and the attendant software that is required. Wow. Unless I can get it bundled, but we'll see. But newish machinery needs to be purchased rather quickly. And not only that, but we have to pay our bills too. And if it was not for your generosity in a recurring patronage of Netroots Radio, even the cost of a espresso type coffee drink once a month sent our way allows us to not only fulfill our civic duty as Resistance Radio, but, the other part where we get to pay our bills so we can slide under the radar for a while. And this newish machinery needs to be purchased. And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to do all of that. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter simply by going to @NetrootsRadio. How simple is that? Tom takes care of it for us, and thank you, Tom. I take care of @Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then put that out on social media, linked up, so you can get linked up for your linking pleasure. And enlightenment, I hope. You can follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Wherever. All right, let's dig into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Now, I am not proposing any type of violence against any authoritarian figure, whether they be religious or just temporal, secular. I don't care. What I'm alluding to is really just a lovely egg dish with an equally lovely velvety hollandaise sauce. Please, We have a culinary bent here, and if it means that maybe some corrupt priest chokes on it, well, some people call that karma. Some people call that retribution. Dan Desai Martin brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and of course, he is out of Share Blue Media. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos could soon join other Trump associates in jail now that a federal judge learned DeVos blatantly ignored a court order. I am not sending anyone to jail yet, but it's good to know I have that ability, U.S. Magistrate Judge Sally Kim said during a court hearing on Monday. The issue stems from a lawsuit against the Education Department brought by former students who attended the now bankrupt Corinthian College. In that suit, Kim ruled that the department must stop collecting student loan payments from students because of an Obama-era rule for a program that would allow federal student loan borrowers to request loan forgiveness on the basis that their school engaged in unfair, deceptive, or illegal practices. And Corinthian College went out of business because of that, and fraudulently continued to collect the loan payments from the students, the suckers, the rubes that they suckered. And Betsy DeVos has how many mega yachts? Yeah, I know. It's from the Amway fortune. Nothing corrupt about a pyramid scheme like that, is there? When DeVos took over the Education Department, she effectively gutted the Obama-era program, ignored the court order, and continued to collect student loan debts from hundreds of people. The department even garnished wages and seized tax refunds from at least 1,800 former students in the years since the order. The department refunded only 10 students money that they were owed. I'm not sure if this is contempt or sanctions, Kim told department lawyers at the hearing. At best, it is gross negligence. At worst, it's an intentional flouting of my order. Bloomberg also reports Kim told lawyers she was astounded that the department would ignore her orders. Well, of course. But there's two justice systems, and apparently Judge Kim is unaware of that, or maybe she's very well aware and she's making a point. When you're a rich person, the laws are for little people. DeVos, a billionaire heiress who donated millions of dollars to Republicans before being nominated for Education Secretary, has faced controversy from the very start. At her confirmation hearing, DeVos defended guns in schools because a school in Wyoming might need them to protect against grizzly bear attacks. After looking into the matter, PolitiFact said DeVos was wrong. Schools in Wyoming were all gun-free at the time, and that a $40 can of bear repellent from Amazon would likely be more effective. After she was confirmed, DeVos backed the Trump administration's efforts to take federal funding away from the Special Olympics. And she has a track record of refusing to protect LGBTQ students from discrimination. None of these controversies landed DeVos in legal jeopardy. But refusing to follow court orders could bring real consequences. We think contempt is clear on the record presently before the court and expect that the court will issue the finding regardless of what sanctions are imposed. Eileen Connor, a lawyer representing the students, said during the court hearing, if DeVos does land in jail, she will join Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, his former deputy campaign manager, Rick Gates, former campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos, longtime personal lawyer Michael Cohen, and former national security advisor Michael Flynn, as Trump associates who are either in jail or awaiting a sentence for federal crime. Matthew Chapman of Raw Story brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and his wife, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, have come under fire for using their official positions to help one another. Chiefly, recent reporting suggests that Chao vastly favored officials from McConnell's home state when taking grant meetings, and that McConnell's staff set up these meetings by telling Chao which developers are McConnell's friends and loyal supporters and which were not. On Tuesday, which was yesterday, Politico reported that McConnell's campaign is openly boasting about this to supporters, even with a tweet highlighting the malfeasance. Even some Republicans in Kentucky are not amused by this gambit. "Where are my corrupt for Kentucky shirts?" tweeted Doug Stafford, chief of staff for Rand Paul. Ouch. Chao, for what it's worth, has denied allegations that she showed favoritism to Kentucky. But clearly, her husband has a different opinion about it. Mohammed and Jonathan Landay of Reuters bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Four senior Democratic lawmakers said they believed the Trump administration may withdraw from a treaty that allows unarmed surveillance flights over U.S., Russia, and other territory, warning it would be a gift to Russia and undermine confidence in the U.S. commitment to the Ukraine. Pulling out of the Open Skies Treaty, an important multilateral arms control agreement, would be yet another gift from the Trump administration to Putin. The Democrats on the House and Senate Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees wrote in a letter to the U.S. Secretaries of State and Defense, and seen by Reuters. The Open Skies Treaty is a critical element of U.S. and European security, and a decision to withdraw would be another blow to regional stability as well as Ukrainian security. Senators Robert Menendez, Jack Reed, respectively, the top Democrats on the Foreign Relations and Armed Services panels, and Congressmen Elliot Engel and Adam Smith, chairs of the House Foreign Affairs and Armed Service panels, respectively, wrote in the letter. The treaty, which was signed in 1992 and entered into force in 2002, permits each of the nations that are parties to it to carry out short-notice, unarmed surveillance flights over the entire territory of the other parties. The purpose of the treaty, which allows nations to collect information on one another's military forces, is to increase transparency and build confidence among the states that are party to it, including the U.S., Russia, and the Ukraine. One thing that people don't realize is that this whole idea, the Open Skies Treaty, guess what liberal commie came up with that? Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it took all that time from 1992 for it to be signed as a treaty, and then enforced another 10 years in 2002. The idea of transparency, a handshake, well, Asked to comment on the letter, a State Department spokesman who spoke on condition of anonymity said, "We do not comment on congressional correspondence. We continue to implement the treaty and are in full compliance with our obligations under this treaty, unlike Russia." The Pentagon did not immediately reply to a request for comment. Now, some experts and administration officials believe the treaty has outlived its usefulness, partly because of alleged violations by Moscow. These include restrictions Moscow imposed on certain observation flights over Kaliningrad, a Russian enclave on the Baltic Sea, sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania. Oh, really? Submarine base is there? And flights near the disputed border between Russia and Georgia, because how else can you take over a government another nation inch by inch when you got these damn surveillance flights looking at what you're doing? Now, in response to those, shall we say, incursions, the U.S. in 2016 restricted Russian observation flights over the Pacific Fleet in Hawaii and missile defense interceptor sites at Fort Greely, Alaska, 2016. Wow, I wonder what was going on then. A former Trump administration official, speaking also on condition of anonymity, because you don't know what's going to happen to you if you put your head up, said the treaty was outdated because the U.S. can share satellite imagery that is not overly sensitive with other countries. Yeah, that's true. According to the Arms Control Association nonprofit group, 34 states are party to the treaty, while the 35th, Kyrgyzstan, has signed but not ratified it. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, back in the day, there was a time, not that long ago, when political leaders wanting to do shady or illegal things at least attempted to keep them secret. Such a time was in the run-up to the Iraq War, which is the backdrop for the new whistleblower drama Official Secrets, which takes its name from Britain's Official Secrets Act and, like its American counterpart, the Espionage Act, often tempts politicians to misuse to hide misdeeds from public scrutiny. In Official Secrets, Catherine Gunn, played to a T by Keira Knightley, is a low-level GCHQ intelligence analyst who comes across a memo from the analogous U.S. agency, the NSA, apparently seeking the Brits' help in a scheme to blackmail smaller nations into supporting the Iraq War at the UN. Moved by the egregious nature of the memo, she decides to leak it to the press, setting the stage for personal, national, and even international drama in a movie that combines the best of legal and press procedurals with an intensely personal story of an ordinary person with whom we can identify, growing in the resolve to stand by her moral convictions and the truth. Supporting Knightley here are Ralph Fiennes as Ben Emerson, the human rights lawyer who took her case, Doctor Who's Matt Smith as the lead correspondent at The Guardian, which was also targeted by the government, and Adam Bakri, Gunn's immigrant husband who was cruelly made a pawn in the whole affair. Director Gavin Hood, who gave us 2015's drone warfare expose, Eye in the Sky, like shining lights on places governments don't like them shined, and Official Secrets keeps that going. A maybe too happily ever after rap is followed by a strange, seemingly ancillary scene on a beach that will plant you back in political reality. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet has today decided to award the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine jointly to William Kaelin, Sir Peter Ratcliffe, and Greg Semenza for their discoveries of how cells sense and adapt to oxygen availability.
Thomas Perlman, Secretary of the Nobel Assembly, shortly after 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time.
Greg Semenza was born in 1956 in New York. He performed his prize-winning studies at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, where he's still active. Sir Peter Ratcliffe was born in 1954 in Lancashire in the UK. He performed his prize-winning studies at Oxford University, and he's continuing to do his research at Oxford University, and he's also at the Francis Crick Institute in London. And William Kaelin, born in 1957 in New York, he performed his prize-winning studies at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston, where he's still active in his own lab.
Karolinska Institute researcher Randall Johnson studies the effects of low oxygen. He explained the significance of the work of the new Nobel laureates.
This year's Nobel Prize is awarded for determining how oxygen levels are sensed by cells. Oxygen is essential for life and is used by virtually all animal cells in order to convert food to usable energy. However, the amount of oxygen available to cells, tissues, and animals themselves can vary greatly. This prize is for 3 physician scientists who found the molecular switch that regulates how our cells adapt when oxygen levels drop. Applications of these findings are already beginning to make their way to the clinic, with potential drugs used to treat anemia and to treat some forms of cancer. These fundamental findings have greatly increased our understanding of how the body adapts to change, and applications of these findings are already beginning to affect the way medicine is practiced. This year's 3 laureates have greatly expanded our knowledge of how physiological response makes life possible.
For an in-depth listen about the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, look for the Scientific American Science Talk podcast later today. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seat belts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seat belts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
In the U.S., about 15% of people who have HIV don't know they have it. If you have it, the sooner you get diagnosed, the sooner you can start life-saving treatment. Everyone should get tested at least once, and those at high risk should get tested at least once a year. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, get tested as soon as possible. Healthcare providers, conduct routine testing according to CDC's guidelines. Screen all youth and adults for HIV risk behaviors. Help patients understand their risk and the best prevention options. If people test positive, link them to treatment and prevention counseling quickly. HIV testing is important. Know your HIV status. See your healthcare provider to get tested or find a testing site at gettested.cdc.gov. You can also get a home testing kit online or from a drugstore. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Earlier this year, President Trump circumvented the congressional appropriation process by declaring a national emergency. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And then, based on his alleged national emergency, funneling military money to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, to build his border wall. Both the House and the Senate voted to terminate Trump's national emergency, but Trump then vetoed the House and Senate action as expected. This back and forth with the legislative branch demonstrates the president's blatant disregard for the will of the people, who largely rejected his anti-immigrant agenda in the midterm elections, as well as his intransigent disregard for Congress's power as a co-equal branch of government. But there is a way to fight back. Right now, Congress is deciding the Department of Homeland Security budget for the next fiscal year. And it is, I suggest, important for us to raise our voices while we have a chance. We can contact our senators and representatives right now and demand that they cut DHS's budget and prevent the president from transferring money from other agencies to the Department of Homeland Security. If we want to pursue the inclusive, humane values that we as a country profess and for which we have stood many times in the past, then we must hold Trump's DHS accountable. And that means cutting its budget. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1888. That was the day that the United Hebrew Trades was founded in New York City. The new effort was patterned after the United German Trades. The goal of the organization was to organize Yiddish-speaking workers. Individual Jewish workers had been active in the burgeoning U.S. trade union movement since the 1850s. But the United Hebrew Trades marked the first time for such a broad-based collective effort to organize Jewish workers. Three of the early founders were Bernard Weinstein, Morris Hillquit, and Abe Kane. Weinstein was a young shirt maker turned union activist. Morris Hillquit would become one of the leaders of the American Socialist Party in the United States. Hillquit was born in Latvia and moved with his family to the Lower East Side of New York. Like many Jewish workers, Hillquit found a job in the city's garment industry. He later graduated from law school. Abe Kane was born in Belarus. He was one of the leading voices in Jewish journalism in the United States. In 1877, he founded the newspaper, the Jewish Daily Forward, which still exists today. Under the leadership of these men, the United Hebrew Trades quickly became a presence in New York City. In March of 1890, 4,000 Jewish workers commemorated the Paris Commune with a march through the city. They more than doubled that number just 2 months later on May Day. By Labor Day, 15,000 Jewish workers marched together. These public demonstrations showed the power of Jewish workers. By 1910, the United Hebrew Trades had swelled to 106 unions. 150,000 men and women were members, including thousands of Italians and other nationalities. By the 1930s, the United Hebrew Trades had reached its peak of 250,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
I'm Mark Belanger. As unionists around the world hold labor education classes, workshops, and conferences, the vocabulary used at these events can be confusing for some. For example, discussions about government austerity programs or the rights of workers quickly involve terms such as liberalism, neoliberalism, libertarianism, and progressivism. Tom Hartman, a left-of-center radio host in the United States, was recently asked about these terms by a caller.
For example, the Liberal Party in Australia being, kind of having liberal sentiments, the Liberal Party in Australia is actually what we would call the libertarians. The classic liberalism, and this gets confusing, but classic liberalism was the idea that government should not be helping people out, that it's not the proper role of government to be making sure that people have enough food or enough clothing or enough health care or anything like that. Classic liberalism says that those are things that should be done by the marketplace, by the so-called invisible hand. And, the main proponents of that today in this country are the objectivists, the followers of Ayn Rand, and the libertarians. The Libertarian Party was started in the 1940s by a lobbying group, a real estate industry lobbying group, in order to promote their interests, in order to be to put a patina of respectability and thoughtfulness on these ideas. And they even refer to themselves as liberals frequently, which just totally confuses people. You get these objectivists saying, we are the true liberals. Well, yeah, somebody from Great Britain would say yes, or somebody from Germany or Australia would say yes. But here in the United States, liberals, the word liberal has meant not that, not no government. It has meant big government, basically. It's meant that government actually does stuff like FDR did and like LBJ did. Those kinds of things. So somewhere along the 60s and 70s, really in the 70s, and I would say largely as a result of the Powell Memo and the institutions that it created, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, all these other groups, the Federalist Society and whatnot, liberalism got reinvented. And that is to say the classical libertarian version of liberalism. And it got reinvented as a new form of liberalism, neo being the Latin, or maybe it's Greek, I think it's Latin for new. And so the neoliberal idea was, okay, fine, we'll let government do more than just run the police, and we'll let government do more than just run the fire department. Government can play a small role in people's lives. There should be a small social safety net, but it should be a very, very limited role. And these people call themselves neoliberals, and this is, as you point out, the Democratic Leadership Council, which came up. Al Fromm and Bill Clinton basically created this thing in 1991, and Bill Clinton rode it to victory in 92 and governed as a neoliberal. Declaring the era of big government is over, and we have ended welfare as we know it, slashing Lyndon Johnson's programs, ending some of Franklin Roosevelt's programs. And Barack Obama, by and large, continued that process. The Republicans are even more aggressive about that. They wouldn't even refer to themselves as neoliberals. The neoliberals tend to be an infestation inside the Democratic Party. And what's happening right now, I think, is that the Democratic Party is returning to its liberal roots which is why we use the word progressive now instead. Its progressive roots in Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson. The Democratic Party took a huge turn away from progressivism, from all the extraordinary things that were done by these two presidents. Took a huge turn away from them and towards neoliberalism, and it's moving back aggressively.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are under an active freeze warning. And I did take some precautions with the more delicate foliage and plants around the gardens. Let's hope that it was enough. Other areas really close by have actually had a freeze. We haven't had one here. Keeping fingers crossed because it's going to be cold tonight. We should be a bit cooler than we were yesterday, though under sunny conditions. We're expecting a high of about 60 to 62. Winds out of the northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then a clear sky tonight with a low around 35 or so, maybe cooler. Winds out of the northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow we should be bumping around 70. Winds out of the east at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Maybe rain in the beginning of early next week. So that's the beginning and early. Yes, we might have that. And maybe it won't be as cold either because the cloud cover may give us a little bit of a thermal blanket. Pollen is rated at none locally. The air quality index is good at 27 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.24 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles. And relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy, and it looks like they may have thunderstorm activity. What the heck? Rome is 75 and sunny. Kiev is 55 and fair. Kabul is 66 and fair. Hong Kong, 78 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 65 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 58 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and sunny, but you're going to get some in Northern California. What is it? 130 count areas are going to be having their power shut off because of fire dangers. And New York is 54 degrees with rain, and it looks like you have a flood advisory. So that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. China hit back at a decision by the Prague City Council to cancel a partnership agreement with Beijing that would have required it to commit to the One China principle, affirming that Taiwan is a part of China. Czech President Miloš Zeman has pushed ties with China, but the capital's government has figured in diplomatic rows between the two nations, such as one over the mayor's refusal of a Chinese demand to eject a Taiwan official from a conference. This type of action can be termed a breach of faith and does harm to China and the Czech Republic's relationship and the atmosphere of cooperation and exchange, the Chinese embassy in the Czech Republic said. We urge the Prague city government to make a fresh start and return to the correct path that promotes the development of bilateral relations, it said in a statement on its public WeChat account. Otherwise, ultimately, the danger will be their own interests. Czech Foreign Minister Thomas Petrick rebuffed this statement. I am convinced that threats don't belong to diplomacy, he told reporters in Prague. I see it as very strong pressure. I told the Chinese ambassador that we would rather concentrate on creating a friendly environment for development of our relations. The Council's decision to cancel the agreement must ultimately be approved by the City Assembly. The city's leadership elected last year said it is not standard for city-to-city partnerships, such as the one signed by the previous administration, to include diplomatic matters that are up to national governments.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Michelle Nichols of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United Nations may not have enough money for staff salaries next month if member states don't pay what they owe, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned. He told the 193-member UN General Assembly's Budget Committee that if he had not worked since January to cut spending, then we would not have had the liquidity to support the annual gathering of world leaders last month. This month, we will reach the deepest deficit of the decade. We risk entering November without enough cash to cover payrolls. Our work and our reforms are at risk. The United States is the largest contributor, responsible for 22% of the more than $3.3 billion regular budget for 2019, which pays for work including political, humanitarian, disarmament, economic, and social affairs and communications. Washington owes some $381 million for prior regular budgets, $674 million for the 2019 regular budget. The U.S. mission to the United Nations confirmed those figures. Overall, the U.S., the largest contributor to the UN, contributes roughly $10 billion annually in assessed and voluntary contributions across the United Nations system, the U.S. official said. Trump has said Washington is shouldering an unfair burden of the cost of the UN and has pushed for reforms of the world body. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said 129 countries had paid their dues this year, which amounted to almost $2 billion. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro, Shrimp, and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.